Deep in the heart of Central Africa, beyond the last mapped trails and far past the reach of modern infrastructure, there are stories that refuse to disappear. They are told quietly, often at night, passed from one generation to the next with careful precision. These stories speak of something enormous, something patient, something that does not behave like any ordinary creature known to science. For decades, outsiders dismissed these accounts as exaggerations shaped by fear and isolation. But everything began to change the moment a single biological sample made its way out of the jungle and into a controlled laboratory environment. What followed was not just surprising. It forced researchers to reconsider some of the most basic assumptions about life on Earth. The creature at the center of these accounts is known as J'Ba Fofi, a name that loosely translates to giant spider. At first glance, it sounds like the kind of legend that emerges in any dense, dangerous wilderness. After all, humans have always imagined oversized versions of creatures they fear. But what made this different was the consistency. Independent communities, separated by distance and language, describe the same details, the same massive size, the same thick webs, the same unsettling behavior. These weren't vague myths. They were structured observations repeated over centuries. When researchers finally obtained a strand of silk believed to belong to this creature, the initial goal was simple: identify the species. The expectation was that it would match some known arachnid, perhaps a large but undocumented relative of existing spiders. The sample was carefully preserved, transported under strict conditions, and subjected to a full genetic sequencing process. What scientists expected to take a few hours turned into days of repeated testing. The results didn't just raise questions. They created entirely new ones. The first anomaly appeared in the protein structures encoded within the DNA. Spider silk is already one of the strongest natural materials known, but what the team observed went far beyond typical biological limits. The molecular arrangement suggested reinforcement at a level that shouldn't exist in invertebrates. It resembled processes seen in organisms that develop hardened internal structures, something closer to bone formation than anything previously observed in spiders. This wasn't a minor variation. It was a fundamental departure from everything known about arachnid biology. As the team continued analyzing the data, the implications became harder to ignore. If the silk itself contained these properties, then the creature producing it must possess internal systems capable of supporting such structures. That raised an immediate problem. Spiders rely on exoskeletons, which impose strict limitations on size. Beyond a certain point, their bodies simply cannot support additional weight. Yet the genetic markers suggested mechanisms that could bypass those limitations entirely. It hinted at a biological workaround that shouldn't exist. Eyewitness accounts suddenly started to sound less like exaggerations and more like incomplete observations. People had long described the creature's body as unnaturally solid, almost like wood or metal. At the time, such descriptions were dismissed as metaphor. But now, they aligned disturbingly well with the lab findings. If the creature could reinforce its body with mineral compounds, then its size might not just be possible, it might be stable. The second anomaly emerged when scientists examined genetic markers associated with aging. Every species has a kind of internal clock, a predictable pattern that determines lifespan. In spiders, this clock runs relatively fast. Even large species rarely live beyond a few decades under ideal conditions. But the markers found in this sample told a different story. The metabolic processes appeared significantly slowed, suggesting a lifespan far beyond what any spider should achieve. The initial estimate was cautious, but even the most conservative projections pointed towards something extraordinary. This wasn't a creature that lived for a few years and disappeared. It was something that could persist for decades, possibly longer. A predator with that kind of lifespan doesn't just survive, it learns. It adapts to patterns. It memorizes its environment in ways that short-lived creatures cannot. That realization shifted the conversation in the lab. The question was no longer just about what the creature was, but how it behaved over time. A long-lived organism in a stable ecosystem has opportunities to refine its hunting strategies, optimize its territory, and become incredibly efficient. The jungle, dense and largely untouched, will provide the perfect environment for such a creature to thrive without interference. Then came the third anomaly, and this was the one that truly unsettled everyone involved. In the genetic sequence, there was a gap, not a minor irregularity, but a complete absence of connecting information. The DNA strand appeared to stop and then resume, as if a section had been removed or had never existed in any known lineage. This kind of discontinuity is extremely rare, and when it does appear, it usually indicates something profound about evolutionary history. What it suggested in this case was difficult to accept. The creature did not fit neatly into the existing spider family tree. In fact, it didn't seem closely related to any known species at all. It appeared to have diverged so far back in time that no modern reference point could bridge the gap. In simpler terms, this might not be a new species. It might be a surviving remnant of something ancient, something that branched off long before modern ecosystems took shape. That idea carried significant implications. If a lineage like this had survived unnoticed, it meant there could be entire branches of life that remain undocumented, hidden in environments that are still poorly understood. The Congo rainforest, with its vast expanse and dense canopy, is one of the few places on Earth where such a possibility still exists. Large portions of it remain unexplored, not because of lack of interest, but because of the sheer difficulty involved in navigating it. The environment itself plays a crucial role in this mystery. The forest floor exists in near constant darkness, with thick vegetation blocking sunlight. Humidity remains high, temperatures stay consistent, and decomposition happens rapidly. It is a place where life operates under different pressures, where adaptation takes forms that might seem unusual elsewhere. In such conditions, a creature like J'Ba Fofi wouldn't just survive. It could evolve in ways that are difficult for outsiders to predict. Local communities have always understood this. Their knowledge isn't based on speculation, but on direct experience accumulated over generations. They don't treat the spider as a myth. They treat it as a presence. Their warnings are specific, not exaggerated. They speak of trails where movement becomes dangerous, of webs that are not easily visible until it is too late, of subtle signs in the environment that indicate proximity. One of the most striking aspects of these accounts is how the creature hunts. Unlike predators that rely on speed or strength alone, this one appears to rely on structure. Its webs are not random constructions. They are placed strategically, often along paths that animals frequently use. These webs act as extensions of the creature's sensory system, allowing it to detect vibrations from a distance. It doesn't need to chase. It waits, guided by signals transmitted through its own network. There are also repeated mentions of a scent, something faint but noticeable. Those who have encountered it describe it as slightly sweet, almost inviting. But within local knowledge, this scent is considered a warning sign. By the time it is noticeable, one is already too close. Modern analysis of certain biological compounds suggests that such a mechanism is not impossible. Some organisms produce chemicals that influence the behavior of others, altering perception or response. Historical reports add another layer to the story. Early expeditions occasionally documented unusual events, massive webs blocking paths, unexplained disappearances, and strange substances found on clothing or equipment. These reports were often archived without further investigation, labeled as anomalies or misinterpretations. But when viewed collectively, patterns begin to emerge. There are also accounts of individuals experiencing temporary paralysis after exposure to unknown substances in the forest. While these incidents were never conclusively linked to any specific organism, they align with descriptions of venom that affects the nervous system without causing immediate unconsciousness. Such a mechanism would be highly effective for a predator that relies on immobilization rather than pursuit. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all is the possibility that the creature is not solitary. Some reports suggest the existence of larger networks, even colonies, hidden beneath the forest floor. These claims are difficult to verify, but they are consistent enough to warrant attention. If true, they would represent a level of organization not typically associated with large spiders. When researchers step back and look at the full picture, the question shifts once again. It is no longer just about whether J'Ba Fofi exists, but about how much of the ecosystem it influences. A long-lived, highly adaptive predator could shape the behavior of other species in subtle ways, creating patterns that might go unnoticed without careful study. The DNA analysis did not provide all the answers. In many ways, it made the mystery deeper. It confirmed that something unusual exists, something that does not conform to established biological frameworks. But it also highlighted how little is known about certain parts of the world. The jungle still holds secrets, not because they're deliberately hidden, but because they exist beyond the reach of routine observation. And perhaps that is the most important realization. Not every discovery comes with immediate clarity. Some simply reveal how much remains unexplored. The story of J'Ba Fofi is not just about a giant spider. It is about the limits of human knowledge and what lies beyond it.